There's an exception to every rule, and agriculture is no exception. In fact, there are so many exceptions in this area that the term agricultural exceptionalism, or AE, was coined. Agricultural exceptionalism originated when the government excluded farm workers from labor laws, seeking to exploit them. In modern times, the term AE is used to describe the many loopholes that exist in farming. This might look like turning a blind eye to contaminated water sources draining into the mainstream water, allowing excess pesticides to wreak havoc on wildlife hundreds of miles away from farms. AE also encompasses what are known as ag-gag laws, which specifically gag or prevent whistleblowers from reporting inhumane conditions that occur in factory farms and slaughterhouses. We may romanticize of the smaller photo on the right, when in actuality, chicken farming looks more like the larger photo on the left. In this micro-documentary, we will focus on genetically modified organisms, more commonly known as GMO foods, and how they relate to AE. Before we discuss GMO foods, it is important to understand what GRAS, or generally recognized as safe, means. GRAS are a list of additives that are added to food by manufacturers as they are considered safe. But who's responsible for making the determination as to what is safe and what is not? In 1958, the FDA was responsible for monitoring the list of GRAS additives. However, in 1997, the FDA put the decision of declaring GRAS in foods the manufacturer's responsibility. The scary part is that the FDA does not require companies to report GRAS additives. It's purely optional. GMO foods fall under the list of GRAS foods. But as we just found out, GRAS foods are not regulated by the FDA. Manufacturers are simply encouraged to register additives as GRAS or safe. So despite being a part of the GRAS list, GMO food safety remains to be seen. In 1994, the very first commercial GMO crop was introduced to the public. It was a tomato. What made this GMO tomato better than a conventionally grown tomato? The Californian company Calgene released the Flavor Saver tomato and touted that it was modified to remain firm after harvest. This meant that tomatoes could be left to ripen on the vine and no soggy or bruised tomatoes would arrive at stores or in consumers' kitchens. Not long after that, tomatoes were modified to be more red, disease-resistant, and longer-lasting. A super tomato was born. Let's fast forward to 28 years to today. The top 10 GMO crops in the United States are alfalfa, used for livestock feed, apples, canola, corn, cotton, papaya, soybeans, summer squash, and sugar beets. Note that most of these crops are used as major ingredients in most processed foods, meaning that one genetically engineered crop of sugar beets has the potential to become an ingredient in thousands of other food products. Also notice that tomatoes are not on this chart. More on that later. The same 10 crops are listed here, but now we can see the year in which the GMO version was released and what attributes were modified. Most of these crops were modified to be herbicide tolerant, drought tolerant, and insect resistant. Though there are 10 crops listed here, it's important to note that more than half are used as animal feed, which then massively explode as they make their way into livestock and dairy farming. GMO foods certainly have a bad rap, and deservingly so, but each story has two sides. Proponents of GMO foods say that GMO crops use fewer pesticides and produce larger yields, so that worldwide food insecurity may be resolved by growing GMO foods. The world hunger crisis could be solved through GMO crops. However, opponents of GMO foods say that long-term health effects far outweigh the benefits of an easy cash crop. Less than 30 years after their inception, there may not be enough data to decide, but based on what we have seen thus far, GMO foods may cause hepatic, pancreatic, renal or reproductive effects, and may alter the hematological, biochemical, and immunologic parameters. Enter the food megagiant Monsanto. You may have heard the name before. Remember the Flavor Saver tomato? The company that released it was purchased by Monsanto. The Flavor Saver tomato ceased to exist 3 years after its release, but Monsanto had its hands in the pockets of most major food manufacturers in the US by then. This staggering chart shows the 10 major food manufacturers in the US and the hundreds of brand names under them. It's nearly impossible to go grocery shopping without purchasing a product made with at least one GMO ingredient. Agricultural exceptionalism exists. It started as a way for the government to exploit farmers. There are hundreds of exceptions in agricultural laws, and GRAS and GMO foods are certainly among them. In addition, politics play a large role in agricultural laws, proving profits to be more appealing than public safety. The fact is that the FDA and USDA and their agencies, such as the EPA and Codex, simply have too much to regulate. This chart shows the staggering responsibilities of the USDA alone, not to mention all the nuances and hiccups that come up in the bumpy road of regulation. In terms of GRAS, as they relate to GMO foods, manufacturers are encouraged to self-disclose if they are using food additives that may or may not be safe for consumption. It's a big game of honesty is the best policy, with food manufacturing megagiants and politicians at the helm. Can we as consumers make the right decision? What is right for you? Is it more important to refuse genetically engineered foods, or perhaps being picky is not an option? In our upside-down capitalist economy, fresh, unadulterated foods can cost 3 to 5 times more than processed foods. Be an educated consumer and weigh the pros and cons of genetically engineered foods versus conventionally or organically grown. Look for non-GMO labeling should you choose to boycott GMO foods. When shopping for produce, notice the codes on the sticker. A 4-digit code denotes conventionally grown produce. A 5-digit code that begins with the number 9 means it's organically grown, and a 5-digit code that begins with an 8 means that it is GMO. Shop smart, friends, and thank you for watching.